welcome once again, Janet.
Thank you.
So before we get started into the main topic of conversation, I think it would be really valuable and interesting for you to share just a little bit more about your own journey to love, a little bit about your own story, and how you came to do this work in the world.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, it was actually quite a long journey for me. I have been very focused in the past on my career, and I was very successful. I was hoping that my love life would fall into place, and it never really happened that way. And what I found is that I would date guys that were actually very nice, but things never really moved in that direction that I wanted. And I ultimately realized that I had this hidden fear of commitment. I was seeing commitment as a place of being trapped and controlled. So when I was reflecting on the kind of men that tended to show up in my life, they were great men, but they were the kind of men who were looking for a companionship and not for a commitment. So I really started to look at how I could change my perspective about commitment so that it would support me in moving towards a committed relationship that could lead to marriage. So when I was able to shift that to commitment as a place where I can be free to be myself, to be supported and loved for who I am, different kinds of men started to show up. And the kind of men that started to show up were the kind of men that were looking for a commitment as well. And then my husband, my now husband, showed up. And so, yeah, we ended up getting married when I was 46. And things have just been really great since then. So that's kind of my story in a little bit of a nutshell with the whole commitment thing.
Yeah. So I think that this is really, a couple of things that you said are really significant here. I think this fear of being swallowed up in a relationship is a big fear for a lot of women, particularly those of us that have been very independent for a long time. And of course, the big perception, I would say the prevailing perception is that the men are commitment phobic, right?
Right.
But what we might not realize, if it's not at the surface, if it's more of a subconscious thing, is that we may have, as women, we may also have some fears or some blocks toward really being ready for that, even though we might deeply long for it, right?
Right. You're exactly right, Michelle, because I would tell my friends that I really want to meet a great guy that, I can be in a committed relationship with. And yet it wasn't showing up for me. So what I said I wanted, and then what I was so afraid of, it was clashing and not able to really bring me what it is that I wanted. So it really took a lot of understanding of, where that fear came from, and then being able to really look at it in a more supportive way. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, I think, a lot of times we as women think that men are the ones that are commitment phobic, when really it's not so much them, but it might be us as well too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think that some of this stuff, at least for me, oftentimes operates on more of a subconscious level. So I think I had that along with a few other things, but I wasn't fully aware of it for a long, long time. Like my perception is that I was fully ready, open, and available for a relationship, when in reality, I actually had some blocks. And the blocks were creating some self-sabotaging behaviors and some self-sabotaging thoughts, but I didn't have this to the surface. I didn't have this available to me, this knowledge available to me on the surface for a long time. So what did you do that helped you, first of all, to recognize that was there? And then what did you do to be able to move through that? Just curious, because I think this is a common challenge.
Yeah. So the way that I recognized it actually wasn't a very obvious process. It really came after, I think, a lot of, dating and a lot of me saying that I wanted to meet that great guy to be in a committed relationship, and then just never meeting the kind of men that wanted that kind of relationship. So it was really, I think, I got to the point where I felt like everything else in my life seemed to be just really going well. And I was taking the right kind of action as far as putting myself out there to meet men. And I was doing whatever I could from my end, but it still wasn't happening. So I started to kind of reflect back on what it is that might have been keeping me from being able to move forward. And I recognized that at an early age when I was in middle school. I remember my mom being downstairs in the kitchen and she was upset with my dad. She was banging her pots and pans. And in that moment, I realized that I never want to be dependent on a man. I
Mm.
want to always be able to take care of myself because my mom is feeling like she's trapped and controlled. So commitment to me meant being trapped and controlled. And what I've realized is that, in hindsight, I think my mom might have been actually going through menopause. So maybe she wasn't even upset with my dad, right? But it was like that story that I created. So when I realized that, it was almost like, okay, you know what? That's actually not very rational. Um, because if I am really wanting to be in a committed relationship that leads to marriage, then what is another way that I can look at it that is rational, that I can believe in as much or more than my original, belief about commitment? So I started to kind of play around with different ways that I could believe in commitment. And so I tried, different things on, and the commitment, is a place that I can be myself, to be loved for who I am, and to be free to do the things that I love. That felt really good to me. So I just started to really wear it. And then I was able to really lift or live into that. And then that's when things really shifted. So, I think, for women who are in a situation where they sense that they have a fear of commitment, it would be helpful just to have an understanding of where that came from. And then from there, you can recognize, okay, how can I look at this in a different way that I can believe in to be as true, that's going to support me in moving me towards that love that I want, and then start doing that. And things will start to shift to where you will feel more comfortable with commitment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of times we have to be able to get out of our own way to move forward toward having what we really want. And this is just one example of one thing that could be getting in the way. But let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about some of the things that you believe that a woman can do if she really wants to increase her chances of meeting the kind of man who wants to get married. Because there are a lot of women who have a desire to be in a committed, loving relationship and perhaps leading into marriage, and yet they might feel like they've tried everything. They might not know what to do. They might feel stuck. So let's start there to try to create a new possibility for these women.
Yeah, so I would say that there are some key things that women can start to do. And one of them, Michelle, is for a woman to get really clear on what her vision of love is. And what that means is to really think about what it is that you want for your love life from the standpoint of what it is you want, not what you don't want. And really create that into a very descriptive vision that you can actually see and feel into. So you have your vision of love. And then the other piece would be to determine like what is most important for you to have in a partner. And I'm not talking about like, oh, he needs to have a full head of hair, he needs to be 6 foot tall, but I'm talking about more of the qualities that a man possesses, like integrity, trust, a really good communicator, those kinds of qualities that are really going to make for a good husband. Because a lot of times when we're focusing on something that is superficial, we can miss a lot of great men because great men come in different packages.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing, in addition to getting clear on your vision, figuring out what's most important for you to have in a man, would also be to determine what it is that your core values are. So let's say that your core values are that you want to be able to, have trust. You want to be able to feel at peace. You want to feel really happy in your relationship. So what you can do is you can use those as measurements when you're meeting somebody, to see, am I feeling at peace, when I'm with this person, and even when we're apart? Do I feel like I trust him? And so when you use those as measurements, they help you to know if you're staying on track to what it is that you want. The other thing is to determine what your boundaries are. So, for example, like let's say that like you have a boundary of you're wanting to be able to express yourself like in a way where you're going to feel respected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're communicating with a man, whether you're dating or if you've just gotten into a relationship, you're going to want to notice if the way that your dynamics are with him are such that you're feeling like you're respected and he's really listening openly to what it is that you're saying instead of, cutting you down. So it's really paying attention to, what it is your vision of love is, your core values, what your boundaries are, and making decisions and choices in favor of those things that you want. Because what happens, Michelle, a lot of times, and I can say this because I was one of those women where when I wasn't necessarily dating somebody at the time, and if somebody came along and he was, really cute and we had good chemistry, right, I would go out with him because there was nobody else around. But what happens is that even though I knew inside that, I know that this isn't really going to go anywhere, that spending time with somebody where we know isn't really the one actually takes away the energy for us to be available for more of the right kind of men to show up. So it's really important to not let yourself get sidetracked by men and relationships that aren't really quite right for you.
Yeah, that's so important and so profound. And I can so relate to it, Janet, because I did that myself because I was afraid of being alone. I didn't like the feeling of loneliness. And if I couldn't see something out there on the horizon, it was hard for me to stay in that place of honoring those core values and that vision of what I really wanted. And so I spend a lot of time in relationships with Mr. Right Now, which obviously wasn't the best thing for me or for them. It wasn't really self-honoring to me, and it wasn't really honoring to them, because you can energetically feel that. They can energetically feel that. And what often happened to me, and I think this is also common, is we think we're just going to dabble out there for a little while and kind of keep one eye still open for something else. And then we can find ourselves 6 months or a year or several years down the road where we've invested in a relationship that really we knew from the start wasn't going to be the relationship that really fulfilled our deepest longings for love. And then we find ourselves 5 years older, 10 years older, so much time goes past. And we've lost potentially the valuable opportunity of meeting the right person. So one of the things I often say to my clients is a big part of being with the right person is not being tangled up with the wrong person. Because just what you were saying, energetically, we're not in a space where we're really open and available for the right person if we're kind of settling into the relationships or just getting caught up in the chemistry when we kind of know it's not going to lead us to where we want to be.
Yeah, that's so well said, Michelle. I think a lot of times women tend to make short-term decisions, hoping for long-term results. And the more important thing is to look at, am I choosing in favor of what it is that I want? And then kind of let that be your driver. So as much as you possibly can choose in favor of what you want, those individual choices are going to add up, and then they're going to move you to that love that you've always desired.
Mm-hmm. And I like that you're emphasizing, Janet, on being in tune with and focus on what it is that you most deeply want and not what you don't want, because we know that what we focus on expands. And I believe that it's really a powerful thing, and I think you'll probably agree with this, to actually be proud of and claim your desire for a relationship and to even want what it is that you want. It sometimes feels like we don't even want to speak these words, maybe because we don't want to be disappointed, or we're afraid it won't happen, or because we don't want to sound desperate, right? But I just think there's a lot of power in knowing, owning, and speaking what you actually want.
There is, because in order to really be able to speak that and own it so confidently, you really would have had to put some thought into it. And by putting the thought into it, you're consciously calling forth what it is that you want, which then brings it towards you. So yeah, I really appreciate that you're, talking about, calling it and saying it out loud and just really claiming it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about how we can potentially get in our own way by, whatever our fears are, the fear of being engulfed or losing our identity or our freedom in a relationship. That's just one example of many. But there is still this perception that there's a lot of men out there that don't really want to commit or are not really moving in toward the direction of a committed relationship or marriage. And I think this is a confusing thing for a lot of women. And it's sometimes difficult to know who the men are that are really wanting a committed relationship or marriage, and who the men are that might be giving us just enough to hold on to or making us believe that that might happen, but they really have no intention of following through. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's really a great question, because at first glance, it can be difficult to tell the difference between a man who is just keeping you stringing along or a man who really is serious about you. The suggestion that I have is that when you first meet somebody, the way to really be able to have that be revealed to you is to really take things slowly, so that you're able to really learn about him and you give him the opportunity to learn about you. What you're going to find is that either he's going to want to know you more and he will take the time with you for both of you to know each other, or he's going to try to get physical with you early on. So if a man is trying to get physical with you early on, it doesn't mean that he's a bad man. It just means that he's been able to get that from other women. And so it's only natural that he's going to try to do that with you. The thing is, though, for women who are really looking for something more, it's really in their best interest to not fall into the trap of that physical chemistry and to not have things turn into sex so soon, because as you know, Michelle, as women, we tend to get more connected with men after we sleep with them.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's like we mistake that physical chemistry for love. And we think that, oh my gosh, this really could be the one. And so it really blinds us, and it clouds our vision to a man's true intentions. So the more that you can just let things develop more naturally and put the physical part aside so that you get to know each other on multiple levels. And then when you're connected, and then if you feel like you know how he really feels about you, he really does want things to be taken to the next level with you, then you're starting to know his true intentions. And so at that point, then, sleeping together may be okay. But in order to really know the difference, you really need to take the time to allow the relationship to develop on multiple levels. So, I would say that just really, stick to that and get to know each other a lot more versus rushing into the physical part of the relationship.
Yeah.
And then, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And I had something else that came to mind too, is that a really key thing too is to pay attention to what a man says and how he behaves and acts. Because a man who is saying that he wants to see you is going to make plans to see you and you'll get together. A man who says he wants to see you, but he's not setting the date, he's not making the plans, he's not really wanting to see you. So you want to be with a man whose words and behaviors and actions are positively matching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and allowing for that space and time to get to know someone, it gives you a chance to observe. I always tell women to approach a new relationship from a place of curiosity and observation. And that means you're kind of leaning back a little bit and allowing yourself to have the space and time to really get to know the heart and character qualities of this man, and also how he's going to present and show up for you over a period of time. And that chemistry thing can be really deceiving because it's so powerful sometimes and it's almost irresistible, right? I mean,
Right.
it feels so good and we can get so swept up in it, and yet we all know that chemistry doesn't necessarily equal compatibility, and it can actually lead to a lot of heartbreak and disappointment because you might wake up one day and go, oh, I don't even know this person, and you've now made this you've now become emotionally involved with someone that you don't necessarily want to be with. It can lead to a lot of pain, particularly for women.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you could actually find yourself down this rabbit hole of this obsessive kind of behavior with a man if you sleep with him too early on without really knowing him, if the sex is really good. So yeah, it's totally in your best interest to really hold off on that piece of it.
Yeah, and what I liked that you said is that the right man, the man that really is interested in having a real relationship with you, is going to be willing to take that time to invest getting to know you. And part of this is you being centered in knowing your own intrinsic value as a woman. And if you really want to be in a loving, committed relationship or marriage, this is something you can do to be self-honoring and to even set yourself apart from what this person may have experienced with other women. You set yourself apart as a woman of high value. He tends to respect you more, and he tends to see you differently than the woman that might give him sex right out of the gate, so to speak, for lack of a nicer way to say it.
Right.
I mean, men do like women with standards, and we don't always know that. And, sometimes I feel like they can be like children and they kind of are trying to push the envelope to see what they can get. But I've interviewed a lot of men over the years, and men do respect and they like women with values and women that it's not a game, but you're more of a challenge, and they tend to value what they have to work a little harder to get, right? That's just a human characteristic.
Right, right. Yes.
So how does a woman, um, other than what we've talked about here is in terms of the whole sex thing, how else does a woman present or show up in a way that helps a man, the right man, to see her as a potential wife, as just opposed to someone that he might want to spend time with or companionship or hanging out with?
Yeah, so I would say a big thing, Michelle, is when a woman is really beautiful from the inside out, that really helps a man see her as wife material. And what I mean by that is that a woman who's beautiful inside out has really done the work to shed any of her past heartache or pain that has come from past relationships, so that she's really just free to be present and loving with the man that she's with. Life can be stressful as it is. And so for men, when they're looking for a wife, they're not looking for a woman who is going to add more stress to his life. Some of the qualities with the internal beauty would be a woman who's able to express herself openly, who's comfortable being vulnerable and sharing her true feelings and her true thoughts. Because what that does is it allows her man to really feel comfortable and to open up from his end and to really share, more deeply with her. For men, they don't have the benefits that women do with, our girlfriends, how we're able to really share at such a deep level. And so, with men, they look to a woman to be able to have that deeper connection. So, with somebody that a man is thinking of spending his life with, he wants to be able to feel like she's going to really get him at a much more deeper level than the general public or his coworkers get him as. So, I would say that being able to really just live in the present moment after shedding, any past pain and heartache, that is, a great quality. Being able to really communicate and express yourself openly and being vulnerable is another really great quality for wife material that a man would be looking for. And really living your own life. And what I mean by that is having activities, passions, hobbies, interests that you love to do outside of your job, so that you're not reliant on him for your happiness and for your well-being, because that also shows that you value yourself as a person. And it's something that a man can really respect when you have your own life and then you're adding to the relationship. I think, Michelle, a lot of times the mistake that women can make is that they're looking for that right person or that person they think that they have to have. And ultimately, it comes down to being the right person ourselves first before we get married. Because, once we get married, if we're not the right person, then it doesn't mean that we're going to have happily ever after. It's actually going to be worse. So when we can be the right person ourselves by letting our inner beauty shine, by being very open and sharing our true thoughts and feelings, and by really living our own lives, then that's what draws a man towards a woman and then has him thinking that, oh, you know what, that's the kind of woman that I really want to spend my life with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really beautifully said, Janet. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So for women that do desire a committed relationship or even specifically marriage, and I know you and I are both a big fan of marriage, when do you feel like it's appropriate for a woman to, where I would say, when and how is it appropriate for a woman to bring up the subject or topic of marriage? Because that could be a tricky one, right?
Yeah, it is tricky because, we tend to think, or maybe conventional advice has people thinking like, oh, I really can't say anything about that in the beginning
Mhm.
because it might, scare him off. But I'm a firm believer in that it's not so much about, whether or not you say it in the beginning, it is really the way that you approach it, right? So it's very different coming from a place of desperation where you feel like you're running out of time, your biological clock's ticking, and then you're telling a guy that you just met, on a first date that, yeah, I really want to have kids within the next 2 years. Do you know what I mean? It's like that very kind of like, ooh, okay, maybe this is a little bit much, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're coming from it from the place of, I just really have realized that as much as I have loved being single and being able to spend a lot of time with friends and family, I am looking for something more than that. And, with the right man, I could see being in a committed relationship that could possibly lead to marriage. So you're putting it out there, but you're not necessarily like saying it in a desperate way. You're being truthful, and you're not saying like, well, you're going to be that man. Do
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So, I feel like it's even totally fine to say it on a first date because, as the conversation is flowing, that's something that is a natural thing, when you start to meet somebody and they're like, oh, so, have you been dating for a while? What do you think about dating? What are your thoughts about relationships? And then it just kind of like eases into, that conversation. So it's really about like the way that, we approach it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I actually think that there's a lot of wisdom in having some conversation around this earlier on in a relationship because I believe that you, as a woman, part of being self-honoring is recognizing that your time and that your attention and your affection and your focus on a relationship, you want to make sure that there's at least someone that is somewhat on the same page as you before you invest a lot. And so one of the ways I think that you can easily have this conversation, which goes along with what you said, Janet, is to express maybe some of your own thoughts and desires, not specifically about them. You're not saying, so do you want to marry me? You're not saying that on a first date. You're just saying, yeah, I have this great life, but I really feel like, I've really come to recognize that love and marriage and having that relationship is something that I really want to have as part of my life experience. And then I even think it's okay to say, where do you see yourself in terms of the whole relationship piece, within the next 6 months to a year? Just, it's just a question. You're
Mhm.
not putting them on the spot. You're not saying, so what are your intentions? Do you intend to see me and marry me? You're just exploring where they're at. And a lot of men are very honest about this. And then the key there is to really listen. And then if they're saying something other than, that leads you to believe something other than the fact that they're really ready for a relationship, you have to believe them.
Right. Yes. And I think that's so critical, Michelle, because a lot of times when we're attracted to a man, and if he's saying that he's just really looking for something more casual, we might think that, oh, well, maybe he'll change his mind as he gets to know me more. And then he might end up wanting something, more than casual. So I'm going to, still see him because I really like him. I'm attracted to him. And maybe if I show him more of who I am, he'll like me and then he'll want to be with me in that way. When really, you're exactly right. Like, men are straightforward. If a man is saying that, I'm actually at a place in my life where I'm not looking for something serious, I just am looking for companionship, then believe him and free yourself so that you can be available to meet the kind of man that is looking for the relationship that you're wanting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really big key. And so I'm really glad that you also encourage women to explore this earlier on in a relationship. This is not about coming from a place of desperation, like you said, but it is being self-honoring, and it's also being real and vulnerable about where you're at in your life. You're not desperate, but you are clear. And that's part of what I mean by, I think there's power in you being able to say what you really want, not just to yourself and not, but also to someone else. And this might scare off some guy, but then he's not going to be your guy anyway, because he's not in a place that is where he would be ready to step up and be there for you in that way anyway, right?
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. So for a woman that might be in a current relationship, let's just say we have some women on the call here that have been dating for a while, and maybe there's some things going for the relationships, some things that are going well, but perhaps she feels like they're a little stuck. Things aren't really moving forward or progressing toward a deeper commitment or marriage. What do you think a woman can do in a situation like that? Now, this gets trickier because now we've already invested, we're probably emotionally involved. It can be really hard to think about giving up the relationship, and yet it's a really uncomfortable place to be when you want a deeper commitment or marriage and it's not moving in that direction.
Right. Yeah. So if things are progressing well and if you're feeling good about the relationship and you haven't yet had the talk of with your partner to see what it is that, he's wanting, after a certain amount of time where you feel like you know each other, at a deeper level, where you're connected on multiple levels, it's totally appropriate to have that conversation. And the way that I would broach it would be from your perspective and, what it is that you would like, what you would wish for, rather than coming at it from, we've been together for 9 months and things don't seem to be moving fast enough. Like, how come you're not? So that's not coming from your perspective, right?
Right.
So yeah. So your perspective would be something like this, where you might say, gosh, I really have been loving the time that we've been sharing together. And I really enjoy our relationship. And, I've really realized that, you've become a really important part of my life. And I could really see us, if we continue this way, where we actually could spend, our lives together. And, when I think about that, that really excites me. And I'm just curious about what you think about what I've, shared. And then just kind of, you don't need to say anything more, and then just listen to what your partner is saying. So if he's, saying, some things that are similar to what you're saying, then that's, a good sign because you're both on the same page. But if he's saying that, I just, don't think that I'm there yet. I feel like you're further, ahead of where I am, and I'm not sure if I can get there, like in the time that you're looking for or that you want. Then it's completely fine to have a very open conversation where you can ask, what is it that you think is maybe keeping you from, getting to that place? And then just hearing what it is that he's saying, but I think the opportunity when having this kind of a conversation is not to be attached to a certain outcome or having to have a certain answer, because what happens then is that energetically your partner doesn't feel as open to be able to be honest with you, versus if you're coming from the place of curiosity where you're not attached to what it is that he's going to say, but you're looking at it more as, okay, this will help, inform me of our situation with our relationship so that I can know what I should do. Then he's going to be more likely to open up. And then you can, determine if this is something that is going to work for you or if it's not going to work for you. So I think, these conversations, Michelle, can be a little bit sticky because in our minds, we are already having the conversation before we actually have it with our partner. So then in our minds, when we're having the conversation, we're human, so it's in our nature to think the worst, right? And so we have to be really mindful that, okay, the conversation that we're actually having with our partner is taking place in the now, and to be open to whatever it is that he says, and then to be able to respond from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can feel really scary, I think, to have those kinds of conversations because we don't know if we're having this conversation, we might not know what the answer will be, but the truth really does set us free. And you want to be able to decide about what you want from a place of being informed, not from a place of just guessing, because that allows you to be in choice about whether you want to continue in that relationship and continue to invest, or whether you need to consider leaving it so that you can be available for someone who might be more ready to commit to you if this particular person is not. And I know for me, it was incredibly difficult and awkward to have these kinds of conversations with people that I was dating, and I think for most of us it is, but I think a lot of that is just based in fear. But if we can get to that place that you're talking about, where you're really approaching it from a place of curiosity, wanting to understand where this other person is coming from, and not being attached, overly attached to what is being said, so that we can be open to really hear what is being said, then it gives us pertinent information to be able to make the best decisions for our lives and to be in a place where we're self-honoring. Because staying in a relationship where you're not ever going to get what you want, it has a detrimental effect on a woman's soul and on her confidence and on her ability to continue to feel good about herself. It's just a really, in my opinion, it's a really destructive thing.
Yeah, it is. And it so reverberates also into our health.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, yeah. So if we can know what it is that we want and then allow the other person to share what they want, and if it doesn't match up, right, then to be in the place where, okay, I can make this decision. What decision can I make that's going to, leave me feeling empowered and also at ease, about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So important. Well, this has just really been a really juicy conversation. I've really loved speaking with you. So, Janet, I want to give you a chance before we wrap up today to just leave the ladies here that are listening with just maybe a last little piece of wisdom, advice, or inspiration.
Yeah, so ladies, I just want you to know that love doesn't have to happen to you. You can actually create the experience that you want on this wonderful journey to love. And the only thing that it takes is to really cultivate the conditions within yourself by really letting your inner beauty shine and choosing in favor of what you want. So I really encourage you to do that. And I know that you can find that love that you've always desired.
Hmm. Thank you, Janet. I love that as a parting thought. And I also want to thank each of you for being here with us, because the fact that you're here is a compliment to you. This shows that you're on a path of growth, that you're on a path of discovery, and that you're seeking to expand what is possible in your life. So we're honored by your presence, both Janet and I. Thank you so much again, Janet, for being here with us.
Thank you, Michelle. I've really loved this.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.